Hi, so as they want to, Blizzard have gone through their philosophy design for hunter pets. They tend to do this for things where they're going to be making major changes to a class or a spec, or in this case, a bit of a class to do with their pets. Very important part of a hunter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over what Blizzard have said about it and just sort of give you the lowdown on that one. If you want to check out the original post yourself, or of course put feedback, very important as well, I've put a link in the description below where you'll be able to check it out there. So the first change really is in terms of types of pet. Now this actually sounds quite good for me personally. I am not a hunter main, I play a hunter as an alt, and it's quite nice just for me to be able to choose the pet I'd like to do. But in reality we have the three different classes of pet, and you know, if I want to go out soloing and tanking, have a pet that can tank for me so I'm not getting loads of aggro, I need tenacity pet, and vice versa. So what they're saying is in Battle for Azeroth, all pets will have equal damage, health and armor. All can tank or DPS equally. Choosing to put a particular pet into tank spec feels outdated, so we're going to shift all pets to a setup that will work as though they're spec'd into both ferocity and tenacity. In Legion terms, those terms are still going to be in. Cunning, ferocity, tenacity are still in, and different pets are still one of those categories, but it's going to mean something different. That's more towards the end of the video there. So all offensive and defensive passive abilities such as Blood of the Rhino and combat training will be rolled into every pet by default. Charge will be removed, and all pets will have growl and dash or swoop. Some spec-specific activities will be redistributed where appropriate. We are keeping the names Ferocity, Tenacity and Cunning, as I've just said there, as the broad groups that all families fall into. They are no longer changeable, and each has a new passive and active ability that are almost useful in any, or useful in almost any situation. We'll go over those towards the end. So the next thing they sort of said here is they want to maintain and or reinstate pet family uniqueness. I always shudder at the term uniqueness. It's a bit like, for Battle for Azeroth, the term uniqueness is going to have the same Pavlovian effect on me as Class Fantasy did in Legion. I always worry. For me personally, I like it when gameplay comes first. You know, how useful is it? How much does it allow me to be able to play the content I want with the class I want to play? Now, in this particular case, I don't think there's going to be any major concern with that, but it is always, for me, a little warning bell. So it says pet family flavor is part of what makes selecting a companion unique and special, and want to emphasize that even more. A special ability has been added to all pet families. That we're missing one. Exotic pets will still have their unique ability, like Surface Trot, in addition to a new ability. Pure flavor abilities that many pets have are also staying like Trick and Rest. So in other words, if it didn't have a tangible effect on your gameplay or your ability to complete encounters or your PvP or whatever, then it can still stay because, you know, it's not affecting the strength of anything. Now, again, for me, who'd like to be able to pick the pet that I like the look of most, this is going to work a little against it. Again, I'm not a hunter main, so I'm not as involved in this as some of you may be. But yeah, you can see it from both points of view, of course. From a role-playing point of view, you can sort of say, well, different pets, different pet families at least, should have different abilities that go with that, so you can't really argue against it. But it is going to potentially mean that, you know, you might be picking pets because of that ability, and maybe you don't really like it. That being said, I think overall, when you read all this stuff overall, it does sound like you'll get more choice, not less, in Battle for Azeroth. So that's what's good. And coming on to the next one, this is where some of that choice is going to come in. So they say expanding access to Bloodlust, by which I think they mean Ancient Hysteria. Don't have Bloodlust. Lions. Hello. Can call it heroism, I'm fine with that. But Ancient Hysteria is, I think, what they mean. And the removal of battle res from pets. So, ooh. It says, in Legion, all hunters have access to Bloodlust and Battle Res, but they only exist amongst a handful of families, which leads to very narrow options, which is perfectly true. You know, I have a pet there for those. Like, whenever I'm required by a group, let's say I'm in a dungeon for Ancient Hysteria, not Bloodlust, does the same thing, I have to get out my core hound, Spanky. I'm not very keen on Spanky. You know, he's a bit clumsy. He's a bit big, he gets in my way. I'd much rather use a different pet. But, you know, that's one of the very few pets that has ancient hysteria. So that's what I have to use in those situations. So what it says here, to that end, bloodlust, ancient hysteria, will be available on roughly a third of the tameable pet families, rather than just 2. In a world where we are proliferating abilities to many families, our first inclination was to add battle res to a separate third of those families. However, after seeing that landscape, it felt odd to fully embrace Resurrection as part of the Hunter kit. Further moving into Battle for Azeroth, we are solidifying Bloodlust and Battle Res as the strong shared cooldowns that a group can bring. And I think in particular here, they're thinking about dungeons. They're not really saying it, but I think they're really thinking about dungeon groups. Because in a raid, of course, you know you're going to have some Battle Reses in there. You know you're going to be able to have, you know, Heroism or the equivalent of. Call it Bloodlust if you must. Whereas in dungeons, that's not always a given. So I think this is really with an eye on dungeons. So it says 1 offense and 1 defense. In that world, hunters having access to both of the super powerful groups benefits didn't feel appropriate. So hunters are going to be losing the capacity to do a battle res altogether. No pets will have battle res, but a good third of them will have ancient hysteria. So, the next thing they said is, in terms of a variety of pet ability packages, because it's important to acknowledge that some hunters want to maximise their impact with their pet, while others are collectors who want a pet for every occasion. So in other words, some will want their one pet to do everything. Some will like the idea of, okay, I'm going to use my flappy pet because that's going to be good for this, and I'm going to use my pig pet because that's going to be used for that. And do you know what? I've got a snake because that's going to be good for that. Says there should be opportunity to cleverly swap from one pet to another in a given situation and reap the benefit. At the same time, the hunter who has grown attached to their spider named Fluffy, Gordon Bennett, who comes up with such rubbish lame names, I don't know, should feel effective across the game. We're going to try to ensure that every pet package is attractive with a unique combination of benefits that work in many situations. So there is a sort of acknowledgement there. We all know how it works. If you're going to give different abilities to different pet families, you are going to have a situation where some are, you know what, some are just stronger than others. But remember, what they've talked about is that, you know, all pets of a particular type are going to have some as standard as well that should make them strong in all situations. So I think the aim, what I'm reading into this, is if you're a min-maxer, if the hunter is your main and you're going to be doing it for more difficult content, you are going to be getting used to the idea of having a stable of pets and swapping between them as appropriate. But if, you know, you're just like me and you just want to be able to do reasonable content, you know, you don't have to knock yourself out, then if you've got a particular pet that you like, it should be good enough. Do you know what? It's good enough. I think that's the idea there. So on to the sort of almost the final bit in it, and this is what they're going to be doing with the ferocity, tenacity and cunning. So what they did say is that there's currently 51 pet families, and each family is going to be categorized as ferocity, tenacity or cunning, of course. And it says each one will have an active and a passive. The active will be a hunter class button that changes contextually with your active pet. So this will work much more like warlock pets. So warlock pets have a particular ability that is attached to them, and you can key bind it. You can bind it on mine, it's like on a queue, when I'm on my warlock at any rate. And it changes according to which warlock pet you have out. Same sort of thing here with the hunter pet. So I can bind it to whatever I want to bind it to. And if I change pets, it'll just automatically update with that ability. So I have my button, which might be G, for example, which is just, you know, the active ability for whichever pet I happen to have out at the time. So as you can see here, these are the actives and passives. So ferocity pets now will all have ancient hysteria, okay, or primal rage, they seem to be calling it here. That's what they're all going to have. So that's what they mean about roughly a third. Every ferocity pet is going to have that. So, you know, I can use Fluffykins for that. That's fantastic. The passive is going to be Predator's Thirst, which is a passive 3% leech for you and your pet. Okay, so that's that option. Remember, this pet can both be used for DPS and or tanking, depending on what you need. All you have to do if you just don't want it to tank is to take the growl off, is how I read into that. So I can go out soloing, I can use this pet, and if I want it to tank for me, it'll tank for me, because it's got enough armor and health to do so. But if I just want it to DPS, well, it's fine for DPS too. Tenacity ones, again, these are ones that traditionally at the moment are the tanky pets. And they've got actives and passives related to that. But remember, these can also be used for DPS. So survival of the fittest, the active there, 20% damage reduction for the hunter and pet for 6 seconds with a 3-minute cooldown. So if you're on a fight where you've got particular need for an extra defensive, or you might have to do some extra soaking, aspects of the turtle may not be about for that point, then you could use a tenacity pet and you could use it for this. Endurance training, the passive there, 10% max health for you and your pet. Again, nice situation here. You know how it is sometimes in a raid. Particular ability goes out. Maybe you're a little bit too low item level, not quite enough stamina to comfortably survive it. Well, maybe you go for a tenacity pet, and that means you've got some extra health there. It helps you survive that out as well. Cunning, the final one. So the active is Master's Call. A friendly target and your pet are immune to root and movement, I think that means, impairing effects for 4 seconds with a 45-second cooldown. Okay, and the passive is Pathfinding, an 8% movement speed for you and your pet. So you can choose whichever pet you want from each of those families and get that active and passive, and you've got a larger range of pets that you can choose that will have access to those, because there's going to be roughly a third in each one, round about 17 pet families roughly for each of those types of pet. So going on to the sort of final bit where they're sort of just shoring up their philosophy on it and trying to explain what they're trying to do with it, which will help you form the basis of your feedback. So it says, while this does create a landscape where there may only be a handful of families that exactly fit the combination of tools you prefer, each family was chosen with variety as a premium. There are winged creatures, predators, grazers, and more represented across as many abilities as possible, while keeping them thematically appropriate. So for 2 specific examples they give, a spirit beast in Battle for Azeroth still has Spirit Mend and Spirit Walk, and will gain the endurance training and survival of the fittest. They also have a new ability, Spirit Shock, that dispels magic and soothes enraged enemies. Cats, on the other hand, gain cat-like reflexes, which is a 30% dodge cooldown, in addition to Primal Rage, which is the ancient hysteria thing, and Predator's Thirst, which is their leech. Both are able to tank or DPS equally, however, so it's just a case of which particular extra abilities do you want from them. And then it says, finally, nowadays only about half of the pet families out there have any useful ability, and we want to improve on that. Now, to be fair, I'm quite pleased about the way they're describing this, because nowhere here are they saying it's all going to be bangs and whistles, everything's going to be perfect, you can pick any pet and it's all going to be magnificent. So what they're saying is they want to improve on that. And it does sound to me like it would be an improvement. Certainly from my point of view, where the hunter is not my main, I don't need to min-max it, but I still, you know, like to play it. Then it sounds like it's going to be an improvement to me. It says, in Battle for Azeroth, Bloodlust, Ancient Hysteria, I think that's the last time I'm going to have to say that, will be much more prominent, so hunters should no longer feel bound to the Core Hounds and Nether Rays as their best options. Most importantly, these changes should result in a pet landscape where all pets can serve as DPS or tank, as well as they could in Legion. So there we are, that's what Blizzard have planned for Battle for Azeroth. As I say, the link is down below if you want to add in your feedback, particularly if you're a really keen Hunter player. Always bear in mind with your feedback though, if there's something you just don't like about it, they are going to do this. So your feedback is more of potentially, I suppose, trying to sort of say, well, you know, these are the pet families that are more common perhaps, and maybe they should have the abilities that are going to come in useful more often, or something of those lines. It's always best with feedback to sort of work with the general philosophy that they're trying to achieve, and always make sure that you've got something to back up with you, if you want anything changing. Or remember, if you actually really love these changes, and I'm pretty positive about most of them, then again, it's also important to actually put your feedback and go, do you know what, this is fantastic, I'm going to looking forward to this, because that's positive feedback too. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with other people who might be interested. Now, until next time, I'll see you later.